How did you go from being a veterinarian then? You studied to be an animal doctor. Why did you change to be a people doctor after being an animal doctor? And you have been very, very successful.
Well, I appreciate you, Pastor Jim, asking me that question, because a lot of people don't ask that question. I have a degree in agriculture from the University of Missouri, a degree in veterinary medicine from the University of Missouri, and half of my postdoctoral fellowship in comparative pathology, where I do autopsies on animals and people, came from the University of Missouri, Iowa State University, and I finished up at Washington University in St. Louis. And to make a long story short, as you pointed out, I did go to Africa with Marlon Perkins from the old Mutual Omaha Kingdom show. That's how that happened.
I watched him when I was a kid.
Some of you are old enough to remember Marlon Perkins.
Of course. Oh, my goodness.
I had worked for him as a kid in grade school and junior high and high school, and he gave me a lot of things to do because as a farm kid, and whatever he'd say to do, I did. And the city guys didn't want to do that. And so in 1961, I was a graduate student, again, at the University of Missouri, to get my veterinary degree and a postdoctoral fellowship in comparative pathology. And as a 21-year-old kid, I ran into the first mass die-off in America from pollution. Did all the chemistry. All the professors were on Christmas break, and the graduate students were in charge of the services. By the time the professors came back, I had it already figured out, and we got it published. And I gave Perkins a copy of it, just out of respect for him, because he's one of my first male mentors who was not a family member. And he got me to go to Africa and work on the White Rhino Project. And I was there for 2 years, and I get this letter from Perkins out in the middle of nowhere in Africa. And he said, I need you back here in the States, Wallach. I just got this big grant from the National Institutes of Health to do autopsies on animals that die in the big zoos in North America and people who live within a 10-mile radius. And because of your paper you wrote in 1961, we believe that we could use zoos in the big cities as the canary in the mine. They would give us some sense of what's going on with pollution, because there's so many different species of animals in the zoo. There's bound to be one that would be sensitive to the pollution and save us from dying ourselves. And so I came back to work on that project. And over 10 years, I did 20,000 autopsies, 10 million chemistries, 10 million special stains looking for this pollution. And there were 17,000 some change, over 454 species of animals and 3,000 humans on the project. And this was published in a book, 1,200 pages, which is in the Smithsonian Institute as a national treasure. So what the bottom line was, the reason why it's in the Smithsonian Institute, the bottom line was that every animal, every human being who dies of what we would call natural causes, heart disease, stroke, liver disease, Alzheimer's disease, these sorts of things, are actually caused by nutritional deficiencies, not pollution. And then they sent me to the Yerkes Primate Center and Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia. And the Yerkes Primate Center was raising all these primates for NASA and the space missions. And I was supposed to be the pathologist on the project. And there's pathologists there who'd been there 15, 20 years, and all they had written on was papers on parasites of these monkeys, just parasites. That was their interest. And I wasn't there but 6 months, and I ran into the first non-human case of cystic fibrosis in a monkey. Got it actually documented by pathologists all over the world. I just sent them a sign. I said, what do you think this is? And they said, oh, that's a classic example of cystic fibrosis. And I write them back, and we didn't have social media back in the 70s, right? No. And I wrote them back, and I said, well, thank you. On your letterhead, thank you very much, because this is the first non-human case. And I knew it was, but I didn't want to say it without having documentation from all the experts, because I just started as a pathologist here, and these guys have been here for 20 years. They may have seen it before, but didn't know what it was. And, I mean, the National Institutes of Health, the press, I mean, went around the world several times. It was a huge story that this was the first non-human case of a disease that was supposed to be genetically transmitted. Well, it turns out it was actually nutritional deficiency in the whole colony, because 24 other baby monkeys of the same age that had no genetic relationship with this monkey also had the cystic fibrosis. I got permission to get biopsies of them. And, of course, they had saved blood from the parents every month for years. And when the babies were born, they saved blood, froze it. So it was very easy for me to go back and do all the analysis of the blood. And I figured out what causes cystic fibrosis. Wrote it up, and they fired me. And so that's when I went back to school to become a physician, because I knew that this would maybe be 1,000 years, maybe never, that they would get it right. And so I couldn't leave these kids die without trying to save them myself. So that's why I went back to school.